Tiago, to do the initial prayer for us.
If everybody, if you could please put your cell phones off or on vibrate so it doesn't get in the way of our guest speaker. God, thank you for all the mind and hearts present here tonight. We're grateful for Júlio being here to speak to us about moral laws. Please, Lord, give him your strength and your divine inspiration to help him get your message across to everyone. Good spirits amongst us, please help us understand these teachings and truly have the will to put them to practice for our growth and towards our fellow beings. Amen. So tonight we have our guest speaker, Júlio Carvalho. He's from the Spirit Center, Divine Light, and he's here to talk to us about moral laws.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Let's start by wishing peace in our hearts. I apologize for being 26 minutes late. It's Friday, but that's not the reason. I've been coming here for so many years, and Thursday it's 8 o'clock. So I thought Friday is also 8 o'clock, but apparently it's not. 7 o'clock, so I apologize. So tonight's topic is on moral laws. And in order for us to clearly understand what these moral laws are, maybe we should analyze our own laws, our civil laws. First of all, why do we have laws? Well, the reason why we must have laws is to have some sort of order. Imagine our society without any laws. That would be constant chaos everywhere we go. Our civil laws were designed in order to keep order in society. But since our society is constantly changing, so are our civil laws. For example, traffic laws. These laws were created when we started to build cars. What was the need of traffic laws when you have no cars? Now imagine that if anyone could drive their car just the way they wanted, we would have constantly accidents. As a matter of fact, the reason why the first speeding law was created, it's because a man got killed in New York City. He became famous, or better said, infamous, because he was struck by a car in New York City. As a result, we as a society, we established a civil law that determined the speed in which we could use our cars. Now, traffic laws were not created before because we didn't have any cars. So there was a specific time in history in which we had the need to create a traffic law. But these laws, like traffic laws, they are not the same. They change throughout time. Not only they change throughout time, but they also change throughout space. What I mean by this is that in some roads in Europe, you could drive your car as fast as you can. There are no speed limits. Now, here in the US, certain roads you could go only 55 miles per hour, others 65 miles, and others 75 miles per hour. Depending where you find yourself, you could change the law. So the law is changed in space, but the law is also changed throughout time. Obviously, as we got better in building our cars, so the speed of our cars also changed. So the limit for driving a car back in the 1940s, it's very different than the limit that we have today. And why is that? Well, when you were driving a car back in 1940, if you're going 40 miles per hour, you felt the entire car shaking. And not to mention that the roads were not as smooth as they are today. So you really felt the car and you think that you were going very fast, but you're going only 40 miles per hour. Remember the Beetle? You know, the Volkswagen, very famous car. That car was able to do everything, go underwater. You know, if you break that car, you could fix it with your wife's bra. And the car was one of the best designed cars. You know, no cooling system in that car. One of the few cars in history without cooling system. You know, the Germans, they wanted to build a car for war without high maintenance, and hence we got the Beetle. So if you're driving the Beetle before in a very poor condition, you really felt that you're going super fast. Meanwhile, you're just going very slow. It's just because of the condition of the road and the car itself. But now, if you drive a Lexus, you know, a Mercedes, you could be going 100 miles per hour and you don't feel a thing. As a matter of fact, you think that you're going slow when you look at the car, at the speedometer, then you might notice that you're going this fast. So the car have improved, the roads also have improved. As a result, we have to keep changing the laws to adjust to a new reality. What about marital laws? The laws that regulate our relationships. These are changed throughout time as well, and space. We are in the year 2019, and it's very hard to believe that in some countries, someone is still allowed to marry to multiple partners. Multiple partners. And that was the result of men going to war and leaving an entire family behind with no one to take care of the family. As a result, the civil laws allowed a man, if he could afford more than a wife, with her children that was left behind by the men who got killed in the war, he was allowed legally to marry more than one woman. Nowadays, that's not so much necessarily, but the law is still applicable in some countries. So the point I'm trying to emphasize is that civil laws are changed throughout time, and they are created by us. And since we are imperfect beings, so are our civil laws, because they reflect our imperfectibility. They change throughout space, and they change throughout time to suit our needs. The first code of law is the Hammurabi Law. And basically what the law said, if you stole something, you got your hand cut. You know, very harsh laws. Yet the purpose was to have some sort of order. But today we are not talking about civil laws. We are talking about divine laws, also known as natural laws. Natural laws are divided into material laws and moral laws. Now, what are material laws? Material laws are laws that regulate matter. And the easiest one to explain is gravity. You know, if I relax the muscles in my fingers, this object will drop. Now, in reality, the object is not being dropped, but rather there is a force pulling this object down. And there was a scientist back in Cambridge University in England that, the story goes, he was sitting under an apple tree and the apple fell over his head. And at that moment he had an insight. The apple was not falling, but the apple was actually being pulled by a force. And as a result, we came to know this force as gravity. Now, my question to you is this. Did Isaac Newton discover gravity or he created gravity? Which one was it? Which one was it? He discovered gravity because gravity was always there. Apples always fell before Isaac Newton. He simply named a force. So for Isaac Newton, the moon is constantly falling around the earth. So he just put a name to it. The interesting thing is, Isaac Newton, he never described what gravity is. He explained how it works. He had built some basic formulas to describe the motion of objects in space. These are known as the four formulas that control matter in space. Are you aware that even today, when NASA sends a probe to Mars, and it always baffles me, when you send a probe to Mars, it's not like you sending Marcio to New Jersey. Connecticut is fixed and New Jersey is fixed, and we send him to Route 80 and he will get there. That's not the way it works in space. When NASA sends a probe in space, Earth is spinning, Mars is spinning, but Mars is not fixed in space. What they do, they calculate by using the four formulas of Isaac Newton. They calculate a point in space where Mars and the probe will meet 6 months from now. The specific time, specific minute, specific seconds, using Isaac Newton's laws. Isn't that wonderful? I think it's just marveling that people can do this by using this man's calculation that he created such a long time ago. But Albert Einstein, he delved into this subject and said, Isaac Newton never described what gravity is. And for Albert Einstein, objects are not being pulled down, but objects are being pressed by the force he called gravity. So Albert Einstein was actually able to describe what gravity is. And he created the law of general relativity and the specialized relativity. But the point that we're trying to emphasize, that gravity is not a civil law, and gravity was not created by human beings. We find gravity everywhere. It's natural. And because it's natural, it does not change throughout space, and it does not change throughout time. You will find gravity working the same way if you go to Italy, Japan, to the moon, to Mars, to Jupiter. It doesn't change in space. Neither doesn't change in time. When people carried experiments to study gravity back 400 years ago, it's the same principles they use to study gravity today. Gravity did not change at all. And one of the famous experiments about gravity is the Tower of Pisa. Tower of Pisa. That tells you guys I'm hungry. Do you know the experiment from the Tower of Pisa in Italy? Galileo Galilei, he wanted to study gravity. And this is many years ago. And we thought that heavier objects fell faster than light objects. Have you guys ever seen this experiment? I'll show it to you because this is so fun to see. So if I remove which object it's lighter, the key or the book? The key. So we assumed throughout history, just because the book is heavier, it will fall faster. But Mr. Galileo Galilei, he started the scientific approach. And the scientific approach is, don't accept what others says. Don't believe in what people said. Carry the experiment yourself. Study. And then he actually dropped two bowling balls from the Tower of Pisa, so people would see the law in working. So here we go. Can you see that both objects fall at the same time? Yes? So someone asked me to grab the tissue, right? The tissue won't work because of the laws of aerodynamics. The air will create resistance on the paper. But the interesting thing is that back in those days, Galileo Galilei, he said that if we're able to take these two different objects, like this piece of paper and a bowling ball, where there is no air, then both objects will fall together. And back in the 1970s, when the astronauts were able to carry experiments on the moon, everyone saw this in the world. The man had a feather and an object, and both objects fell at the same time. And Galileo Galilei, he said these things, so many years ago, and he were able to carry the experiment and confirm his theory. And I am baffled by these things. I really love science, and that someone so many years ago could actually predict something that would happen in the moon. It is just fantastic. But today's topic is about natural laws. And the natural laws are everywhere. They don't change throughout space. They don't change throughout time. But the natural laws are not only the laws that govern matter. The natural laws that we learn here at the Espíritu Center, called moral laws, they govern our behavior. And in the Spirit's book, Part 3, called Moral Laws, we will learn that the only reason we suffer in life is because we keep trying to break unbreakable laws. Moral laws, unlike traffic laws, cannot be broken. Civil laws can be broken. I could go through a red light whenever I want. I could break that law. What is the worst thing that can happen to me? Get into a car accident? A ticket? But if the cop is not there, I wouldn't get a ticket. Because civil laws, we need human beings who created these laws to reinforce the law. Not only the law changes throughout space, it changes throughout time, but I also need a human being to reinforce the law. Not natural laws. They don't change throughout space. They don't change throughout time. And you don't need anyone to be there to reinforce the law. The law will occur, will apply to us regardless if someone is there to reinforce or not. Now, civil laws, we need to believe in them and study them to follow. For example, if I never study the motor vehicles book, I wouldn't know what are the traffic laws. I need to actually apply myself, study these laws, and pass a test to receive a license in order to drive a car. I need to believe in the power of the book. I need to study the book and pass a test. It's very different with natural laws, moral laws, physical laws. With physical laws, I don't have to read it. I don't have to understand it. I don't have to like it. I don't have to agree with it. There's nothing I can do to escape from these laws. For example, the law of gravity. Let's say I'm a man from the jungle. I never seen white men in my life, let alone I never heard the word science. But here I am climbing a tree. And as I reach for a branch on that tree, I miss it. And then what happens with me? I will fall. Why am I falling? I'm falling because I'm under the law of gravity. There's nothing I can do to escape it. I never heard of it. So natural laws, I don't have to like it. I don't have to understand it. I don't have to study it. Meanwhile, there is nothing I can do to escape from it. So it is with moral laws. There is nothing I can do to escape from it. So I think some of you have tried to explain what we study here to your friends, to acquaintances, maybe a coworker, and some of them have responded to you, "Oh, I don't believe in that stuff." And what they were trying to say is, "Oh, this doesn't apply to me. If I don't believe it, it doesn't apply to me." It is the same as you saying, "Well, I don't believe in gravity. It doesn't apply to me." Is that possible? It's impossible. You don't have to know gravity. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. But you can't run from it. You are bound by life to live under the law of gravity. And the same applies to all the moral laws. There's nothing that we can do to escape from it. So when you open this marvelous book, the Spirit's book, on part 3, moral laws, you will read that the only reason there is pain in our lives, the only reason we suffer, it's because we keep trying to break unbreakable laws. Did you get this? This is the most important part of our talk here, that it is impossible to break these laws. And the only reason we suffer, it's because we keep trying to break unbreakable laws. Civil laws were designed to maintain order. But what about natural laws? What was the purpose of these laws to be created? These laws were created in order for us to achieve happiness as fast as we can. The laws were designed for us to achieve peace as fast as we can. How do we achieve peace? By fulfilling our obligations. What are our obligations? Read the moral laws. By reading the moral laws, by understanding, and most importantly, by applying our lives, we now know what is it that we have to do. And what are some of these moral laws? So in the Spirit's book, you read, first of all, the law of worship. Please repeat with me, the law of worship. Would you please repeat it as if you are awaking in your body? Law of worship.
Law of worship.
The law of worship. Then we have the law of work.
The law of work.
This is my technique to keep you guys alert. Then we have the law of conservation.
Law of conservation.
Law of reproduction.
Law of reproduction.
Law of destruction.
Law of destruction.
Law of society.
Law of society.
Law of progress.
Law of progress.
Law of equality.
Law of equality.
Law of justice and love. Let's talk about some of these laws. These are a lot of laws to follow, right? Well, the thing is that the master that we follow, the most intelligent individual that set foot on this planet, made it very easy for us by saying that all laws can be summarized in one sentence. And that sentence is to love God beyond our things and our neighbors like we love ourselves. Everything else are details. So when you study these laws, what are we studying? The details of how to love God beyond everything and our neighbor as we love ourselves. So let's get to the law of which was the first law I mentioned here? My God, you guys need some coffee. Law of worship. So remember, this is a law, just like gravity. When we try to run away from it, when we try to break it, what's the result? Suffering, pain. And when we experience suffering and pain, it's not that God is punishing us. It's not that God is a sadomasochist entity that have pleasure by contemplating our suffering. That's not the point here. Suffering comes as a signal that the path that we have chosen is not the correct one. And suffering will only occur when we refuse to listen to the invitations of love. If we refuse love, here comes pain to teach us exactly what love was trying to say. In simple terms, I think I've said here this before. Sorry if there's anyone here who smokes. Our intent is not to criticize, but rather to illuminate our own consciousness. Let's say if someone chooses to smoke as a teenager, and a mother comes to that teenager and says, listen, I love you, I care for you, but this is a dumb decision you're making. You are destroying your body. You might get sick in the future. That teenager stubbornly refuses to listen to his mother. Meanwhile, the mother is not saying these things to hurt the child, but rather to awaken his consciousness. So one might say that God is trying to teach this individual through love to stop smoking. And when the teenager listens to his mother, it doesn't cause him any pain. What pain does cause us to listen to our mother? None. But the child refuses, becomes an adult, and continues to smoke. And once he's around 40 to 50 years old, he develops lung cancer. And then finally he drops that cigarette. And he says to himself, why was I so dumb? And I used the cigarette, and look what happened to me now. So he quits cigarette. Now the reason he's quitting, it's because pain through the form of cancer came to bring exactly the same message that love was trying to convey. And working in hospice, I see a lot of people who are dying of lung cancer. And it's a terrible death because they can't breathe. There are these tiny sacs in our lungs called alveoles, and they fill up with air for us to breathe. That's where gas exchange occurs, carbon dioxide through oxygen. But when someone develops lung cancer, these alveoles, they stay very rigid. They don't make any movement, and the person has the sense that they are running out of oxygen. And they are. Not because there's not enough oxygen, it's because they cannot carry an exchange. It's a terrible way of dying. So it's not a sin to smoke. It's not wise to smoke. And at times, you might not smoke, and your friends might ask you, is it because of God that you don't smoke? And you said, no, it's not God that prohibits me from smoking. I can do anything I want. Is it your mother? No, it's not my mother. Is this thing that you follow, spiritism, is that what prohibits you from smoking? Not at all. There I have complete freedom to do anything I want. So why you don't smoke? Well, my intelligence prohibits me. That's what's prohibiting me, my way of thinking. So as you can see, when we refuse to listen to love, pain will come and bring exactly the same message. So the question is, why wait for pain when we can learn through love? All the lectures that you listen here, the books that you read, the highly evolved spirits are trying to tell us through love, do this, don't do that. the novels that we like to read them so much. What is the basic message behind that novel? Do this, don't do that. Look what I did. Follow my example so you will not suffer as much as I did. That is the message behind these novels. So now that we know the purpose of law, what happens with us when we go away from them, let's learn some of the laws. So the first one is the law of worship. So people believe that to worship is something that we have to say for God. God needs to hear my worshiping. That God needs to hear me saying, how superb and how great you are. Worshiping has absolutely nothing to do with something that we're doing for God. Now, what is worshiping? Now, worshiping is a state of awareness. How big and wonderful everything is and how little we are. When you study the law of worship, you will come to know that when you pray, the main objective of prayer is to make a self-analysis. People pray in such a way that they are paying a verbal tax to God. Did you guys get your W-2 returns? We all have to do our taxes. It's something that we have to do. It's a civil law. And if you don't do it by April, you get in trouble. And people pray just like that, like they're doing their taxes. I have to pray, otherwise I'm going to get in trouble. That's not the point. We are losing the objective of the purpose of prayer. When we pray, we are making a self-analysis of how we are. And why do we have to make a self-analysis? Because it's very hard to know where we're going without knowing where we have been. It's very hard to move ourselves forward if we don't know the purpose of our lives. So when you are worshiping, in other words, when you are praying, you should make a self-analysis. So in practical words, at the end of the day, when you are in bed and you're about to go to sleep, you ask your guardian angel, my friend, I know your job, your mission is to help me. Your mission is to help me improve myself. So I'm asking you, please help me be honest to myself. Please help me be truthful to myself. And why should we beg this much? Well, that's because we have been experts in deceiving ourselves. We are truly masters of deceiving ourselves. And why we are so good in deceiving ourselves? Well, that's because if I am honest with myself, there is work to do. If I lie to myself about myself, there is no work to do. I expect the entire world to change and I'll remain the same. So when we pray, this is what we're asking for. My friend, please help me be as honest as I can with myself. And then you make the self-analysis, which means you study your entire day. Well, this morning I fought with my wife. What was the fight about? Well, the fight was about the dirty dishes. And why are we fighting about the dirty dishes? Well, because I said I was going to wash it last night, and I didn't. Well, if I had washed the dishes last night, maybe we wouldn't fight this morning. And here comes the part that I deceived myself. Well, but if I had washed the dishes last night, and everything would be okay this morning, probably not. She would create some other excuse, so we continue to fight, because she loves to fight. Then I deceived myself that regardless of what I did, the fight would occur. Am I being honest with myself? No, I'm not. I'm breaking a natural law here. And as a result, I will be the motive. I will be the cause of everyday fight, blaming someone else for it. Am I growing? Absolutely not. I'm remaining on the same spiritual level. And as a result, pain and suffering will keep bothering me. And what is the purpose of pain and suffering? Is it to punish me? No. It's for me to get out of my comfortable zone and work on myself so I could achieve the next level, so I could develop my potential. So as you do your self-analysis, be honest. What was the motive behind my action? Because the supreme intelligence of the universe does not take into account the action only, but most importantly, the intention behind the action. Let's say you have helped someone, and then you ask yourself the question, what was the main reason I have helped that person? Did I help that person as a means of investment? And what I mean by this, at times, we are more prone to help someone that we know that can help us back. I mean, let me help my friend today with his movement. I mean, with his moving from one house to another. Let me help him with his move, because in a week from now, I'll be moving as well, and I'm going to need his help. So when I ask him, please help me move, he cannot deny my wish because I helped him this week. Now, is this true help, or am I making an investment? Sometimes we help our friends that have money, because we know if we get into a dire straits situation, we know exactly who to ask for. Do we help poor people in the same way that we help rich people? It's a question we have to ask ourselves. The intention behind the action. And if we apply this law of worship, there will be progress. And with progress, peace. And with peace, happiness. Because what is peace? The fulfillment of our obligation. So it's our obligation to worship. In other words, to make a self-analysis. This is just one law. The law of worship. Shall we continue? Now it's 8:02, and I know the lecture is supposed to be over now. And I do not want to make you guys more tired than you are. So what's the law, my friend? What's the civil law? You sure? Okay. So let's go to the law of what? What's the second law I mentioned? The law of work. Most people, when it comes to work, they have a set time of the day in which they want to work, or a set time in life where they want to work. Most of you came from Brazil, and there is a gigantic discussion about Social Security reform. And why? Well, that's because there are 45 million people who are not contributing to the system, and yet they are collecting. There are some people over there who are as young as 40 years old that with the current law, they can simply retire. Imagine you retired when you are only 40 years old. It's just unbelievable. There is no system that can maintain such a state of chaos. Hence the need to reform the laws. And now they're coming up with the minimum age for men and for women. And there are a lot of feminists out there who want to equate themselves with men in any aspect of civil life. But there are some women right now, they are complaining that the age of their retirement will be the same as men. Now, if they truly want to be equal to men, then they shouldn't complain about the age they will retire. But some of them are making the argument that they have a double shift. Women work, during the day, and when they come at night, they also work. Isn't that true? Yes, it's very true. Because there are a lot of husbands out there, when they get home, they just get home. Not the woman. She gets home and she has to cook and then teach the children and bathe them and then wash them. It's a lot of work and prepare them. So when she arrives home, it is a double shift. But one thing about being a woman, biologically speaking, statistically speaking, you guys are stronger than men. Women outlive men biologically. If you have two babies that are sick in the hospital, which one is more inclined to live? The female baby. They are simply biologically stronger. So with the Social Security reform, there's a lot of people out there complaining, we should retire at an early age, but it's not going to work. It's going to be the same for men and for women. And people, sometimes they talk about retirement as the objective of their lives. But when we study the law of work, we will find out there is nothing better in life for us to maintain our health, our sanity, than work itself. And why is that? Well, that's because everything in nature works. What is work? In nature, work is movement. So when you look at this podium here, for example, you might have a perceptual illusion that the podium is standing still. But if you break this podium into small particles called atoms, you will see that all the parts of this atom of the podium, the protons, the electrons, and the neutrons, they are fastly moving. And this is the word of the microcosm. But when you look at the macrocosm, the world of the infinitely large, everything is movement. Nothing is standing still. Everything moves. So when someone decides to be the opposite of work, which is lazy and not move, they are going against a natural law. When they decide to not work, they are going against a natural law, the law of work. And they atrophy. Their brains atrophy. Their lives atrophy. Their relationships atrophy. Everything gets smaller. Have you noticed when someone breaks an arm and they have a cast on? And when they remove the cast 2 months from the date they broke, when they look at the broken arm, it is thinner than the healthy arm. And why is that? Well, that's because the muscles were not moving for 2 months. And as a result, they atrophied because everything was made for movement. So when we decide not to work, we are going against a natural law. And when we study the definition of work in the law of work in the Spirit's book, what is work? Work is any act in which we keep ourselves occupied, any useful activity. That is work. Are we working here right now? Yes or no? Yes, we are. We are working our mind. There are different kinds of work. Some people say, no, I'm not a lazy individual because since I arrived in this beautiful land, I've worked 7 days a week, 31 days a month. Even in February, I have worked 30 days. I'm constantly working. Well, my friends, there are different kinds of work. There is also moral work, intellectual work. Some people are so physically capable to work. They truly work 7 days a week. But when it comes to intellectual work, aren't they lazy? They open a book and they immediately say, the moment I start reading a paragraph, I feel sleepy. That's what they say. Now, why not then read the book while you're standing? Throw some water on your face, but read it. Because what we have here, it's a map. We have a book full of instructions of what to do. This is not pastime. this is an opportunity for growth. So if I take a couple of minutes just to read something in the morning before I go out, I am working myself intellectually, and I'll be avoiding some mistakes that truly brings me pain. And not because I'm going through the law of action reaction, I made someone suffer and this is why I'm getting them. It's for the simple fact that I lack the knowledge, which we call ignorance. So work our mind as much as we work our body. Because if we don't work, what's going to happen is that we're going to atrophy ourselves morally, and that will lead to pain. And then there is moral work. What is moral work? Moral work comes after the self-analysis. I identify myself as making a mistake, and then on the following day, I will work on my mistake in order to avoid it. And that's moral work. So we have 3 levels of work: physical work, intellectual work, which is to learn, and spiritual work, moral work, which is to improve myself. But in the law of work, it also tells us to rest. And I will not discuss rest because I think some of us are experts on the subject. The subject of rest. This is not on, right? You're not recording? Oh, you are. So then I cannot tell the following story. No, we should respect our bodies. Because since most of our audience here are immigrants, I've seen throughout the years people who say, my job requires so much of me and I don't have time for anything. And all they do is work, 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 work. And why are they working? Well, because they want to make lots of money. They want to guarantee their future. Yet they don't respect the law of rest. And the body gets tired. And if we don't come here to recharge ourselves, we ended up breaking the machine. And as a result, we get sick and then we can't work. Now, for people like that, usually all they think it's money. And all they see are numbers. So if that's the case, then we should talk to them in numbers. And the way we have done this, we try to make them understand that coming to the Spirit Center, it is an investment. It is a financial investment. How come? Well, when they come to the center, they will learn how to manage their money better. Because it's everything that we learn here, it's about management, administration. Christ taught us that our lives, our body, is like a company that we need to manage very well. And some people, they are great making money, but they are terrible in managing their money. Have you seen people like that? They make lots of money, but they waste the money as fast as they made it because they don't know how to manage their money. So when they come here, this is what they're learning. But not only that, when a family comes to this place, to this university of the soul, they are learning how to relate with one another. They are learning how to cope with their problems and move forward as a team. Now, if both couples, all they do is work, 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 if the couple, both of the individuals, all they do is just work, 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 it might get to a point that they're so worn out from working that they have no psychological strength to cope with everyday problems. And as a result, what's going to happen? I've seen it, my friends. I've been in the movement for 20 years. I've seen it a couple of times, unfortunately. They get so worn out from working, that the relationship breaks apart. And now a divorce is a result. They hire a lawyer, and what would the lawyer do? Take a bunch of their money in the process of the divorce. So if they had come to the center and stay as a couple, they would save the money from the lawyer. Some people say, I don't have time, because my son has to go to school tomorrow and he has karate classes and piano classes and kung fu classes and all sorts of classes. But the son does not have time to come here because the parents are both equally tired and the son has no time. But unfortunately, this is something we have noticed as well. That son will grow without any moral compass, any ethical notion that will guide them, that would teach them to distinguish right from wrong. And as a teenager, they would receive social pressure to do whatever is cool. And as a teenager, sometimes whatever is cool is the most stupid thing that one can do. And they start with cigarettes, from cigarettes to marijuana, from marijuana to alcohol, from alcohol to cocaine, from cocaine to heroin, and then pills. And now both parents are going crazy trying to get their kid off drugs. And what do? They place them in a rehab. Now, do you think that rehab would be cheap? Absolutely not. It will be lots of money to get their kids in rehab. So as you can see, coming to the center, you will be saving money because you are avoiding these problems. The probability that we'll have these problems if we're here, it's much less than if we're not. I'm not saying that everybody that comes to the center would not develop an addiction. What I'm saying, the probability of not developing is way higher than if we're not here. Because out there, we are left to ourselves. And the constant physical work gets us psychologically tired. And as a result, all sorts of things can happen. So we have gone only through 2 laws. And I am not even describing them in a comprehensive style. I'm just giving here brief notes of each of these laws. But should we continue? 3rd law. Which is the 3rd law? You already forgot the 3rd law. The law of reproduction. That was very good. The law of reproduction. And in that law, we find out so many things about the nature of family ties, the reason why we're here, how the world was populated. And in that law, we will also understand that we're bound to be with one another to maintain the human species. In the law, we'll find something very interesting, that back in history, some people thought if they refrained themselves from doing sex, they were already considered elevated. And they truly thought, if I abstain myself from physical pleasure, I will be a highly evolved spirit. And when you read that chapter, that's not what you get. The understanding that you get is that are other kinds of sacrifices that elevate us. When we sacrifices of our selfishness, our own self-interest, these are the true sacrifices that makes us evolve. Because sometimes people truly don't have any physical relationship with another human being, but their minds are all over the place. And they cause a lot of harm with their thoughts alone. And if we dive a little bit into the history here, the reason these individuals, they developed this concept that by abstaining themselves from sex, they will be considered elevated, it's because the popes were not allowed to get married. Now, why were that the popes were not allowed to get married? Well, that's because all power in our civil law was transferred from father to son. So if the king was about to die, who would inherit the throne? Obviously the prince. So they wanted to avoid this transmission of power in the Catholic Church. So then they prohibited the popes from getting married, which is a contradiction because Peter, he was married. When you read about the lives of the apostles, most of them, they had their wives and their kids because it's a natural law. we need to multiply ourselves. But then let's talk about the fourth law, which is the law of conservation. And in the law, boy, don't we learn some interesting things, especially what has to do with our health. In there, we'll find out that this is nothing but a machine that is under biological laws. And the reason why we get sick, it's because we try to break unbreakable biological laws. We learn there that we need to eat in order to live. But we are in a country where people live to eat. Not all of them, but lots of them. And believe it or not, the U.S. is the #1 country in the world with expenditures in health. Yet, out of the developing countries is the most sick one. Diabetes and cancer, diabetes type 2 in children as early as 13 years old, cancer, and that has to do with our diet, things that you put in your stomach. And one of the things that is so detrimental to our physical health is sugar. The food industry is the third most powerful industry in the U.S. First is the war industry. Second is the pharmaceutical industry. Third, the food industry. And the sugar lobbyists, they control what we eat. And sugar is so addictive that it's 4 times more addictive than cocaine. We are more likely to be addicted to sugar than cocaine. And the other consequence of this is that it's easier to quit cocaine than to quit sugar. And this is why they add sugar in everything we eat, including ketchup, mustard. And as a result, your organism, due to all the sugar that we eat, becomes acidic. And when you have an acidic organism, you are prone to develop cancer. We are constantly producing cancer cells in our body. It's a natural biological process. But if our bodies are too acidic, then those cancer cells, they find the right conditions, the right biological conditions to multiply and become out of control and grow into a tumor. So back in 1931, a German scientist, a medical doctor, he won the Nobel Peace Prize in medicine because he discovered that tumor cells can only grow in an acidic environment. And tumor cells cannot grow in an alkaline environment. And how do you make your body acidic? Take sugar. How do you make your body alkaline? Take lots of green vegetables. So your mother was right all the time when she told you to eat broccoli, because broccoli has a lot of oxygen. Kale has a lot of oxygen. So when you eat this stuff, then you make your body alkaline and you're less prone to develop any sickness. And there are so many studies around the world where they go into these little villages in which they don't have access as much as we do to sugar or to meat, and colon cancer and diabetes are unheard of. These are sicknesses of rich countries. So in the law of conservation, we will learn that we need to take care of this body. When we break that law, what happens? Disease comes into place. Are we being punished? God is not about punishment. God is always about teaching us, educating us. And when we close our ears to listen to love, here comes pain to teach us exactly what love was trying to say. Then we have the law of destruction. We don't have time to cover that. We have the law of progress. We don't have time to cover that. We are under the law of progress. We must move forward. Sometimes pain, it's what it takes to get us out of our comfortable zone in order for us to progress. Then we have the law of society. We must live with one another. It's not so much as a choice. If God wants us to develop spiritually and intellectually by ourselves, we will be born out of trees and not out of people. We are forced to live with other people because we are born in a family. And why are we born in a family? Because from the get-go, we are forced to practice to live with other people. And usually our family members, they represent the adults that one day we're going to live with them in society, at our work. Our sisters that like to annoy us, our brothers they steal from us, they are helping us practice what we're going to go through in the future with regular people. Sometimes a mother that we can't trust, or a father that is not too caring. These are opportunities for us to deal in the future. So when we learn about this law, we finally get the point. I am supposed to be with other people. And I cannot change them, but I can change me. And by changing me, I will change the way I'm looking at them. And when I change the way I look at people, people do change. It's a law of physics. When you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at will change. So the knowledge that we learn here is that when we are aware of these laws, we make everything easy on ourselves. Because just like driving a car and knowing the laws, you are safe and you avoid yourselves from getting a ticket. Driving through life and knowing the laws, we are maintaining ourselves safe and avoiding unnecessary pain and misery in our lives. And I would like to finish by telling something personal. When my wife was pregnant with my kid in November of last year, the doctor who was scanning my wife found that my son had a small tumor in his right kidney. And we were told that the tumor was benign. So if the tumor was benign, I told my wife we could try alternative ways to avoid what they were suggesting. Because what they were suggesting was a nephrectomy. What is the nephrectomy? The removal of the kidney together with the tumor. So I said to my wife, removing his kidney when he's only a day old, because that's what they suggested. We're going to take him out of your wife's belly and we're going to remove the kidney. So I say, no, they're telling us it's benign. Let's try alternative ways. So we've tried, and we waited for every week. We took him to get different scanning. He was born. He was completely fine. You would look at him just perfect from the biological point of view. And the tumor kept growing and growing and growing. So we shop with different surgeons and we checked different people. And it got to a point that it grew to 7 centimeters. So I told my wife, well, there is no way, we have to go through this. And we understand through this knowledge that we only go through what we need to go through. This is not an accident. It's what we learn here all the time. And since what we have to go through, when we pray, let's pray that we are strong enough to accept God's will. Do we know what God's will is? We don't know. No, God knows our will. And what was our will? Our will was for Jonas to be completely healthy and stay here with us in the physical plane. But we always had in the back of our mind that God's will could be that he had to bring Jonas back to the spiritual plane. He was not supposed to stay here with us. So about 3 weeks ago, we took Jonas for surgery, and we kept secret. And people were saying, why didn't you tell us before? What's the point? Sometimes you tell people things like that, and you ended up consoling the people. And to me, that's harder work. Anyone wants to console me, go ahead. I'm open, but please don't ask me to console you. Have you attended someone's funeral and you see the widowed actually consoling the people around there? I mean, isn't that so selfish of the individuals? In reference to the widow, she's in pain, but she's ended up consoling other people there. So I told my wife, we don't need to say this to our family or to our friends. Let's just keep it to ourselves, because at this point, we truly don't know what we're going to do. But so 2 days previous to the surgery, then we had to tell our family. So we took him to the hospital in order for him to have the nephrectomy, removal of the entire kidney with his tumor. And then the surgery was supposed to be for an hour and a half. We were promised by this top surgeon that would stay at the hospital a maximum of 3 days. It was about 3 hours and a half into the surgery, and the surgeon was not there. And the good thing was that both and my wife, we prepared ourselves psychologically for anything that might occur, because we don't know what God's will is. We asked lots of strength to accept whatever the will was. So the surgeon came with some other surgeon that we didn't meet previously. And the surgeon looked at us and said, I made a mistake. And the mistake was he cut my son's aorta. And he bled, and they literally had to revive my son on the operating table. And 6 hours later, that's when we were told that we could see our son. And the medical doctor came to us and said, these are the things that can happen. He could be paralyzed. His stomach might not work, or his left kidney might not work, because, he got hurt a lot in this accident. So after a couple of hours, we were able to see him, and me and my wife. He was fully intubated. And we slept in the hospital for 17 days. And we were able to remain cool, serene, because of all this knowledge that we learned here. And from all the prayers from friends like Marcio and our amiga, our friend Medellin, who knew about this story. And, these prayers, people say, we were praying for you. They're for real. It's when someone says they are praying for you, please be open up to all this beautiful energy, because we were very calm throughout the entire process, truly knowing that whatever is the will of God, it will happen, and we have to be accepted of that. We are very thankful that our will aligned with God's will, because he stayed reincarnated. He really had his foot stepped on the other side for a while, but he stayed reincarnated. But the fact is that when we know these laws, we make everything easy for us. So he was operated on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, his left kidney was not working. He was fully intubated. And on the following day, I told my wife, I'm going to work and see my patients, because what's the point of staying here? You're going to stay here. There's nothing else that we can do. All we're waiting for is for his kidney to start working again, the left kidney, the one that was left behind. So I went to work, and my job is I see dying people, and I assist their families in the dying process. So I make my admission with this patient, and her son comes in, and this man, I'm asking him questions to learn more about his mother, and then I ask him, where is your father? And this is what he says to me. My father died in an accident. I says, what kind of accident? In a car accident. What do you mean? He said, 20 years ago, my father, my mother, my wife, and my 2 daughters, they were inside a car driving back from my brother's wedding. And it was 2 o'clock in the morning when the bus ran the light, struck them so hard, and instantaneously killed my father, left my mother in a very bad shape, killed my wife, and both of my kids, my 2 daughters, 5 and 3, had their right kidney removed. And the doctor told us throughout our medical stay that I should be patient, that my kids' left kidney will work again. And it took 40 days for his kid's kidney to start working. And here I am looking at this man who had no idea what me and my wife was going through, because we were waiting for Jonah's kidney to start working again. And he was telling me about his 2 daughters. So when we learned this knowledge, this was the voice of the Holy Spirits through this man's mouth telling me to be serene, confident that his kidney would start to work again. So I hugged this man and I said, you have no idea what you just did for me, because you have absolutely no knowledge of what happened to me just yesterday, and here you are telling me what happened to both of your daughters. So with the Spiritist knowledge, what we learn is to always look down instead of up when you're facing problems. Usually, when we are in problems, we look at people who are doing better than us. And as a result, it makes our problem look gigantic. When in reality, it doesn't matter how hard our problems are, there are always people doing less than us, in a worse situation than us. So when we look at these people, our problem gets so small. Did I have a problem? Yes, I did. Was my problem big as this man's problem? Absolutely not. And that gives us a boost that we are all under natural laws. And if we follow them, peace should be ours. And as a result, we will be happy, regardless of what we're facing. Thank you for your attention.
Why do you say that Charles is gone?
Good.